I gave my best friend the key to my house when my mother was dying so she could water my plants and feed my cat. She used that key to walk into every room of my life. She copied my business files. She photographed my client contracts. She memorized my pricing structure, my supplier contacts, my 5-year plan that I had written by hand in a notebook on my kitchen table at 2 a.m. while my children were asleep and I was running on cold coffee and the specific desperate energy of a woman who has decided that poverty is a season and not a destination. She took all of it. She smiled at my mother's funeral. She held my hand at the graveside. She cried real tears. I still believe they were real. And 3 weeks later, she opened a business that was mine in every way except the name on the door. And I want to be honest with you about something before I tell you what happened next. The part that nearly broke me was not the betrayal. I have survived things that make betrayal look like a minor inconvenience. The part that nearly broke me was standing in my kitchen on a Tuesday morning, looking at my 2 children eating cereal before school, and asking myself the question that I think every mother who has ever been knocked completely flat has asked herself at least once. How do I get back up when getting back up is not just for me anymore? Before I tell you the answer, and I promise you there is an answer, and it is more beautiful than anything I could have invented, I need to stop and ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by the one person you never once protected yourself against? The person you gave the key to, literally or otherwise? Because the idea of needing protection from them simply never crossed your mind? Drop your location and a yes or no in the comments right now. I am going to read every single one. And I want you to know, wherever you are in the world tonight, that what I am about to tell you was written for you specifically. My name is Diana, and I grew up understanding very early that the people who love you most are usually the ones with the least to give. I was raised in a 2-bedroom apartment in Memphis, Tennessee by a woman named Gloria, who worked the early shift at a hospital laundry facility 6 days a week and came home smelling of industrial detergent and other people's illness, and somehow, inexplicably, still had enough left in her to sit at the kitchen table with me every evening and ask about my day, like the answer was the most important thing she was going to hear. My father had left when I was 4. I have 3 memories of him and none of them are bad, which somehow makes the absence more complicated than if they were. He was simply gone the way weather is gone, completely, without explanation, leaving only the fact of having been there at all. I was not an unhappy child. I want to be clear about that. Gloria made a life inside our limitations with a creativity and a dignity that I understand more completely every year I get older. We did not have much, but we had a kitchen that always smelled like something cooking, and a mother who always came home in a sense, however fragile, that we were held. What I learned from watching Gloria was this: love is not a feeling you wait to receive. It is a decision you make every morning when you are tired and scared and the numbers do not add up, and you make it anyway because there are people depending on you. And that dependence is not a burden. It is the reason. I carried that lesson into everything. I met Renee Washington in the 7th grade in a Memphis public school where we were assigned seats next to each other in English class and spent the entire first week passing notes about the teacher's unfortunate choice of cardigan. We were inseparable from that afternoon forward with the total uncomplicated certainty of 12-year-old girls who have recognized something essential in each other and have not yet learned to be cautious about it. Renee was bright and funny and restless in the way of someone whose mind moves faster than her circumstances allow. She wanted more money, more status, more recognition, more of everything. And she wanted it urgently, in a way I understood because I wanted more too, but differently. I wanted more so that my children would never have to count coins before the grocery store. Renee wanted more so that certain people would have to take her seriously. That distinction, which I did not fully understand for many years, was the fault line everything eventually broke along. We went to different colleges. We stayed close across the distance with the particular loyalty of a friendship that has been through enough together that separation cannot really threaten it. When I moved to Atlanta at 26 for a marketing position at a mid-sized firm, Renee followed 8 months later for a job in the same city, and we fell back into the easy rhythm of people who have known each other so long that conversation is less something they do and more something they simply are. I married Michael when I was 28. He was warm and funny and employed and present, which after a childhood without a father felt like more than enough. We had 2 children in 3 years. Marcus, who arrived with his grandmother Gloria's serious eyes and his father's easy laugh, and Lily, who arrived with opinions about everything and has never once revised that position. The marriage did not survive Michael's decision, at 32, that he needed to find himself, which turned out to mean leaving Atlanta and moving to Portland and sending birthday cards that arrived 2 weeks late. I do not speak about Michael with bitterness, because bitterness is expensive, and I have never been able to afford it. I speak about him with the flat, factual acceptance of someone who has processed a thing completely and filed it appropriately. What the divorce left me with was a 2-bedroom rental, 2 children under 5, a part-time marketing consulting practice that I had been building on the side during the marriage, and a best friend who showed up on my doorstep the night Michael left with 2 bottles of wine and a fierceness in her eyes that said she was prepared to be whatever I needed her to be. I needed her to be exactly what she was. And for a long while, she was. The consulting practice grew because I made it grow with the specific, ferocious focus of someone who understands that focus is the only resource she has in unlimited supply. I worked during school hours. I worked after bedtime. I worked on Saturday mornings while Marcus and Lily watched cartoons and ate cereal and periodically appeared at my office door with important questions about whether cats could be astronauts and whether I thought dinosaurs had been sad about being extinct. I built my client list one relationship at a time, which is the only way worth building anything. I specialized in brand strategy for women-owned small businesses, which meant I spent my days helping women who had built things from nothing figure out how to make the world take those things seriously. It was work that felt like purpose, which I had learned from Gloria was the rarest and most valuable form of work there is. By the time Marcus was 8 and Lily was 6, I had 14 steady clients, a waiting list, a small but genuinely good reputation in Atlanta's entrepreneurial community, and a business plan that I had written by hand in a green notebook on my kitchen table at 2 a.m. while the children slept. The green notebook contained everything: my 5-year financial projections, my expansion strategy, my supplier relationships and what I paid them and why, my client acquisition approach, my pricing philosophy and the specific reasoning behind every number. The proprietary brand framework I had spent 3 years developing and testing and refining that was, by that point, the thing that made my practice genuinely different from every other brand strategist in the city. I called the framework the visibility method. It was built on a simple premise that I had arrived at through watching my clients struggle. Most women-owned small businesses are invisible, not because they lack quality, but because they have been taught, implicitly and explicitly, to make themselves smaller so that the people around them feel more comfortable. The visibility method was a structured approach to undoing that. It was practical and specific, and it worked with a consistency that had become the foundation of my professional reputation. I had never published it. I had never shared the full framework publicly. It lived in the green notebook and in the detailed client files I kept meticulously organized on my laptop, backed up to a cloud drive that I shared with exactly one person for emergency access purposes. That person was Renee. I had given her access 2 years earlier when I had a minor health scare. Nothing serious, a procedure that turned out to be routine. And I had wanted someone to be able to reach my files if something happened and a client needed urgent attention. Renee was the logical choice. She was my closest friend. She was organized and capable. She knew my business well enough from years of listening to me talk about it to navigate the files if she needed to. I trusted her with it the way you trust the person you have known since 7th grade, with the thing that matters most to you. Without calculation. Without protection. Without the thought that protection might be something you needed. My mother Gloria was diagnosed with the aggressive form of ovarian cancer in the October of that year. She was given between 4 and 8 months. She lived for 6. Those 6 months were the most concentrated experience of love and loss I have ever moved through. I drove to Memphis every other weekend. I sat with her in treatment rooms and talked about everything and nothing. I brought Marcus and Lily, who sat on Gloria's hospital bed, and showed her drawings they had made and accepted her diminishing presence with the particular grace of children who have been loved thoroughly, and therefore understand love as something that does not require explanation. I kept the business running through all of it, which I mentioned not to perform strength, but because keeping things running was itself an act of love. For Gloria, who had worked the early shift 6 days a week so I could have options, and for Marcus and Lily, who deserved a mother who had not let grief dismantle everything she built. During those 6 months, Renee was extraordinary. She drove with me to Memphis twice. She stayed with the children when I needed to make emergency trips alone. She brought food and sat with me in my kitchen on the nights when I came home from the hospital and could not speak, and she did not try to make me speak. She simply sat there, warm and present, and let the silence be what it needed to be. I gave her the key to my house so she could water the plants and feed the cat when I was in Memphis for the final 2 weeks of Gloria's life. Gloria died on a Wednesday morning in April. She was holding my hand. The room was very quiet, and then it was the quietest it had ever been, and I sat with her for a long time before I called anyone. Renee was at the funeral. She held my hand at the graveside. She cried. I believe, even now, that those tears were real. Grief does not disqualify people from also being capable of what comes next. That is the part nobody tells you. The cruelty and the love can live in the same person at the same time, and you can be devastated by both simultaneously. 3 weeks after the funeral, I opened my laptop to begin updating my client files for the new quarter. My cloud drive had been accessed 14 times in the 6 weeks I'd been traveling back and forth to Memphis. I had accessed it twice. I want to tell you exactly what it feels like to discover that someone you love has stolen from you, because it is not what you expect, and I think it matters to be accurate about it. It does not feel like anger first. Anger comes later, and when it comes, it is clean and useful and appropriate. What comes first is a physical sensation, a dropping, a hollowing, something that starts in the chest and moves outward to the hands, which is why my hands were shaking when I scrolled through the access log on my cloud drive and counted the dates and the times and began to understand what I was looking at. 14 accesses over 6 weeks. Files opened, copied, downloaded. The green notebook, which I had photographed and uploaded in its entirety 2 years ago, accessed 3 times. My client contracts. My pricing documents. My supplier contact list. The complete visibility method framework, all 47 pages of it, downloaded in full on a Tuesday afternoon in November while I was sitting in a Memphis hospital room holding my mother's hand. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. Marcus was at school. Lily was at school. The cat was asleep on the windowsill in a square of morning sun. The kitchen smelled like coffee, and the particular quiet of a house where children have recently been and will soon return. I picked up my phone. I opened Instagram. I typed Renee's name into the search bar. Her account, which I had followed for years and which had previously been a casual mix of personal photographs and professional observations, had been transformed. The bio had changed. It now read, Brand Strategist, helping women-owned businesses become visible, founder of The Clear Method. The Clear Method? I scrolled down. There were 11 posts, all published in the past 3 weeks. Each one described, in Renee's voice and with Renee's natural fluency and confidence, a framework for helping women-owned small businesses overcome their instinct toward invisibility and claim their market presence. It was my framework. Every structural element, every phase, every proprietary concept, renamed just enough to avoid being identical but close enough that I could have recited what came next before I finished reading each post. She had taken the visibility method. She had renamed it The Clear Method, and she had spent 3 weeks building a public profile around it while I was burying my mother. I put my phone face down on the table. I looked at the square of sunlight on the kitchen floor where it came through the window, and I thought about Gloria working the early shift 6 days a week. I thought about Marcus's serious eyes. I thought about Lily's opinions about everything. I thought about the green notebook and the 2 in the morning and the cold coffee, and all the choices I had made and all the things I had built and what it had cost and what it meant. And then I did the thing that Gloria had done every single morning of her working life. I got up. I called my attorney, and I started over. I want to be honest about what the next 18 months looked like from the inside, because stories like this are sometimes told as though the protagonist moves from wound to victory in a clean cinematic arc, and the reality is considerably less elegant than that. The reality is crying in the school pickup line and then composing yourself before Lily gets in the car, because she is 6 years old and the weight of this is not hers to carry. The reality is lying awake at 3 in the morning doing math that doesn't work yet and choosing to believe it will work eventually because the alternative is not available to you. The reality is calling your attorney on a Tuesday morning with shaking hands and spending money you don't entirely have on legal fees because the alternative is letting someone walk away with the thing you built while your mother was dying, and that is simply not something you are willing to do. My attorney, a woman named Sandra Park, who had handled my business incorporation and who had the specific energy of someone who takes intellectual property theft personally, reviewed my documentation with the focused attention of someone who has been waiting for exactly this kind of case. The cloud drive access logs, the timestamps, the download records, the Instagram posts, the side-by-side comparison of the visibility method framework and the clear method content, which Sandra described in the dry, precise language of legal assessment as derivative to a degree that is frankly insulting to both of us. Sandra filed a cease and desist within the week. She filed the formal intellectual property claim the week after. She was methodical and thorough, and moved with the calm efficiency of someone who already knew how this ended and was simply doing the work of getting there. Renee hired an attorney. There were counter-arguments, the predictable ones, that the framework was not sufficiently original, that the similarities were coincidental, that the access logs proved only that she had opened the files and not that she had used them. Her attorney made these arguments with professional competence, and Sandra dismantled them with professional thoroughness, and the process moved forward with the grinding, expensive, unglamorous pace of legal proceedings that are correct but not swift. Meanwhile, I rebuilt. I contacted every client personally. I explained that I was navigating a legal matter, that my practice was fully operational, and that their work was my priority. Every single client stayed. 2 of them referred new clients during the proceedings, which I think of now as one of the most meaningful professional experiences of my life. The specific vote of confidence that comes when people who have seen your work choose to stake their own reputation on it during the hardest period of your career. I published the visibility method, not the full proprietary framework that remained protected under the legal proceedings, but the philosophy behind it in a series of essays on a professional blog that Sandra approved that established my public authorship clearly and permanently. The essays were shared widely enough in Atlanta's entrepreneurial community that by the time the legal matter concluded, the visibility method was publicly and irrefutably associated with my name in a way that no legal settlement could have manufactured. Marcus and Lily knew something was hard. Children always know. Marcus, who was 8 and had his grandmother's serious eyes, asked me one evening while I was making dinner whether we were going to be okay. I put down the spoon. I turned around. I looked at him directly the way Gloria had always looked at me when she was about to say something true. Yes, I said. Not because nothing hard is happening. Something hard is happening. But we have been through hard things before, and we are still here, and we are going to be here on the other side of this one too. He considered this for a moment with the focused seriousness of a child processing something important. Then he said, "Okay, can we have pasta?" We had pasta. We were okay. Atlanta's Women in Business Leadership Summit was held every March at the Georgia World Congress Center. It was the largest professional gathering for women entrepreneurs in the Southeast. 2 days of panels, keynotes, and workshops attended by over 2,000 business owners, investors, and industry leaders from across the region. I had attended every year for 4 years. I had been invited to speak on a panel this year, Brand Strategy for Scaling Businesses, which I had accepted 6 months before any of this happened, and which I had decided, after considerable thought, to honor. Not because it was easy, because it was mine. The legal matter had concluded 3 months earlier. The settlement was sealed, which means I cannot share the specific terms. What I can tell you is that Sandra was satisfied, and I was satisfied, and the visibility method remains entirely and exclusively mine, and the clear method no longer exists in any public form. Renee had not contacted me since the cease and desist. I had not contacted her. There was nothing to say that attorneys were not better positioned to say, and when the legal process ended, there remained nothing to say that I had any particular need to say. I did not know she would be at the summit. I was backstage preparing for the panel when I heard her voice in the corridor, that specific laugh, the one that arrived without warning, the one I had known since we were 12 years old, passing notes about a cardigan in 7th grade English class. The sound of it did something complicated to my chest that I did not have time to fully process because the panel moderator was calling us to take our seats. I walked onto the stage. I found my seat between 2 women I knew professionally and liked personally. The moderator introduced the panelists. The audience of 800 women in the ballroom session settled into the particular attentive warmth of people who have come to hear something useful and are prepared to be generous. The panel began. We talked about brand strategy and scaling and the specific challenges of visibility for women-owned businesses. I talked about the visibility method, by name, clearly, and with the ease of someone discussing something that belongs entirely to them. I talked about Gloria briefly and about what I had learned from watching her about the relationship between dignity and persistence. I talked about Marcus and Lily and what it meant to build something that was also, in every meaningful sense, for them. Somewhere in the audience, Renee was listening. I knew this the way you know things about people you have been close to for 20 years, a peripheral awareness that has nothing to do with sight. I did not look for her. I did not address her presence in any way. I simply spoke the truth about the work, clearly and with full ownership in front of 800 people, and let that be exactly what it was. After the panel, during the networking reception, she found me. I was holding a glass of water and talking to a woman from Savannah who was interested in the visibility method for her retail business when I felt Renee stop beside me. The woman from Savannah, reading something in the air, excused herself with the graceful instinct of someone who understands that she has just stepped to the edge of a private moment. Renee and I looked at each other. She looked tired. Not dramatically, not in a way that was performing anything, just genuinely tired in the way of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has not been sleeping well. Her eyes were the same. Her laugh lines were the same. She was the girl from 7th grade English class, and she was also the person who had opened my files 14 times while I was in Memphis watching my mother die, and both of those things were true at the same time, and neither one canceled the other out. She said my name. Just my name, Diana, the way she had said it for 22 years, without any particular inflection. I said, I know. She said, I don't know how to... I said, I know that too. We stood there for a moment in the noise of the reception with 800 women moving around us, and I thought about what I actually wanted from this moment. Not what I was supposed to want. Not what the story required. What I, Diana, actually wanted. What I wanted was not a scene. Not an accounting. Not the satisfaction of watching her say in complete sentences the things that the legal process had already established were true. I had Marcus and Lily and the visibility method, and Sandra's satisfied expression at the conclusion of the settlement and 800 women in a ballroom who had just heard me speak about my work with full ownership, and none of that required anything additional from Renee to be real and complete. What I wanted, I discovered in that moment, was to put it down. Not to forget it. I will not forget it. Forgetting is not something I am interested in, and it is not something I am capable of, and I do not believe it would serve me if I were. What happened, happened, and the fact of it is part of the structure of who I am now, and I do not want to sand that down. But carrying it costs something, and I had been carrying it for 18 months, and I was ready to redirect that energy towards something worth spending it on. I looked at Renee for a long moment. Then I said, I hope you find something that's actually yours. Because you are talented enough that you didn't need mine. Her face did something that I will not describe in detail because it was private, and it belonged to her, and whatever happened in her after that moment is her story to tell or not tell as she chooses. I touched her arm once, briefly. Then I went back to the woman from Savannah, and we talked about the visibility method for 20 minutes, and I gave her my card, and she became a client 3 weeks later and has referred 4 additional clients since. There is a shoebox in my bedroom closet. I found it when I was packing up Gloria's apartment after she died, tucked on the top shelf behind a stack of folded church programs and a photograph of me in my 7th grade school uniform with my hair in 2 uneven braids that I have no memory of taking. Inside the shoebox were report cards. Every report card I had ever brought home, from 1st grade through 12th, in chronological order, each one still in the envelope it had come home in. Behind the report cards were programs from every school performance I had ever been in. Christmas concerts, spring plays, a 6th grade science fair where I had won 2nd place for a project about water filtration that I was extremely proud of and had almost entirely forgotten. Behind the programs was a letter. It was addressed to me in Gloria's handwriting and dated 3 months before her diagnosis, which means she had written it before she knew she was sick, which means it was not a farewell letter. It was simply a letter, the kind you write when you have something to say and you decide that saying it is more important than waiting for the perfect moment. I am not going to read you the whole letter because it belongs to me and to Marcus and to Lily, but I want to share one part of it because it is the part I come back to most. Gloria wrote, You always thought the hard parts of your life were things that happened to you. I watched you think that from the time you were small. But the hard parts were never happening to you, Diana. They were happening for you, making room for everything you were going to become. Every hard thing made you more of yourself. None of it made you less. I read that letter for the first time sitting on the floor of her apartment surrounded by boxes, and I read it again the morning after I found the access logs on my cloud drive, and I read it again the night before the summit panel, sitting on the edge of my bed with Marcus and Lily asleep down the hall. Every hard thing made you more of yourself. None of it made you Link is a Sunday morning in Atlanta, and Marcus is 14 now, and Lily is 12, and they are both asleep at an hour that I find genuinely impressive, and I am sitting at the same kitchen table where I used to work at 2 in the morning with cold coffee and a green notebook, and I am thinking about what I want to say to you. Here is what I know. I know that the women who raised us, the Glorias of the world, the women who worked the early shift and came home smelling of other people's hard days and still sat down at the kitchen table and asked about yours, were not sacrificing themselves. They were demonstrating something. They were showing us in the only language that actually teaches anything, which is the language of daily living, what it looks like to choose love as a practice rather than a feeling. I know that building something real takes longer than you think it will and costs more than you budgeted and requires you to keep going on days when keeping going is the hardest thing available to you. I know that this is not a character flaw or evidence of insufficient talent. It is simply what building something real costs, and the cost is worth it, and you are capable of paying it. I know that betrayal by someone you loved completely is a specific kind of wound that does not fully close. I am not going to tell you it does. I am not going to offer you the version of this story where I am so thoroughly healed that the scar is invisible. The scar is there. I have made my peace with it being there. It is part of the structure of who I am now, and there are worse things to be made of than the evidence of having survived something. I know that forgiveness is not the same as forgetting, and it is not the same as reconciliation, and it is not something you do for the other person. You do it for the part of yourself that is tired of carrying something heavy when you need both hands free to build. I know that Marcus has his grandmother's serious eyes, and that when he asks me if we are going to be okay, I can tell him yes and mean it completely, which is the most important thing I know. The visibility method is in its 4th year. I have worked with over 200 clients. I teach a workshop twice a year that has a waiting list. I hired 2 associate strategists this spring because the practice has grown beyond what one person can hold, which is a sentence I wrote in that green notebook at 2 in the morning as a goal for year 5, and which arrived in year 4, which I mention only because I want you to know that the timelines you write down in the hard years are not fantasies. They are plans. And plans, if you keep working them on the days when working feels impossible, have a way of arriving. Gloria kept every report card in a shoebox. I keep the green notebook on my desk where I can see it. Marcus and Lily are going to wake up soon and want breakfast and have opinions about what kind, and I am going to make whatever they want, and we are going to sit at this kitchen table in the Sunday morning light in our Atlanta home and be exactly what we are. Which is whole. Which is enough. Which is everything. Did this story reach something in you today? Tell me where you are watching from and tell me this. Has someone ever taken something from you that you had to rebuild from the ground up? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you know a mother who needs to hear this today, a mother who is tired and scared and still showing up, please share this with her. She needs to know that what she is doing matters and that it is working, even when it does not feel like it is. Subscribe. Hit the bell. Gloria would have wanted you to.